Okay, so this is going to be a quick recap of Striking Out Season 1, Episode 4. This is actually the season finale. Okay, so it basically opens with a home being raided and a child being taken from the home. And it just so happens that this couple, they're actually friends with Ray. And so, of course, they called him. He spoke with Tara and basically convinced Tara to meet with them to decide whether or not she would take their case. So then it flashes to Tara's arriving at the, I guess, office or the coffee shop. And Pete and Tara was doing a little flirting, and he basically informed her that Eric had stopped by. And she was like, okay. And then she actually had a series of visitors. One of her girlfriends stopped by. Just like random filler stuff for the episode. And eventually her mother showed up, and she thought that it would be a good idea for her and Tara to kind of just hang out for the day, go shopping, do whatever. But of course Tara was too busy, and so she basically said that she'll come by the house in a few days, basically after everything calms down. And so next she flashes to Eric, and he's at the courthouse. Now it seems like this entire family has some connection with the legal system. So I think Tara's father is also an attorney, and so Eric, walking through the hall, runs into her father, and for some reason his name escapes me. And basically, he was trying to make small talk. He was asking about his wife and Tara and how things are going. And he was just basically not, like, get the hell out of my face. We're not friends. And I have no interest in what you're talking about, basically. So, he finally makes it to the room where Vincent is preparing for his inquiry, the big case that he's been working on all season. And so, Eric is representing one of the guys. Actually, I think he may be representing both of the guys in this matter, and it's basically a CEO of a company and the Minister of Health, and it has something to do with the hospital being billed and some illegal bidding and how he was able to bid on the job and got the job and whatever the case may be. So that's basically what the inquiry is about. And so he goes into the room, and again, Vincent is Tara's friend, so he has no love for Eric, and basically they kind of went back and forth, bantered back and forth a bit, and basically he showed Eric the door. And that was that. Basically, Eric was there basically trying to figure out if there was he was trying to get an exact date and time when his clients were going to come in and meet with Vincent. And Vincent was like, basically said, I'm not telling you shit. You'll find out when you find out. So, so that was actually funny. So the couple meets, they meet at Tara at the courthouse, and basically the judge is going down all of the issues that they're having as far as cleanliness, I guess his attendance, the fact that his mother is in the throes of her drug addiction. They what they found in the house as far as the syringes and drugs, just drug paraphernalia, and basically saying that at present you're not leaving here with your child, not right now. And so they have to do they could have supervised visitation, and they have to go through an assessment, both parents. And so Tara basically advocated for them to have an independent assessment because of their connection with Child Protective Services and the court. So she thought that it may be better for them to have someone independent come in to do the assessment, which the judge agreed to do that. And so Tara basically tells Ray that she doesn't know how long she's going to be able to employ him. Yes, she got the big payday from the drug dealer whose son gave him half a kidney or liver or something. But, with all her expenses, she doesn't know how long she's going to be able to employ. And so he's basically like, I'll work for you for free, and you just pay me when you have your next payday. He went to Vincent to see what kind of work he can get with Vincent, and of course Vincent was like, more the merrier, because of there's so much going on in this inquiry that, the more hands that are in there helping out, the better. And so Tara finally gets around to visiting her parents' house. And her mom was actually out at the time, so she sat and talked to her dad. And, he told her that he had ran into Eric. And then he proceeded to tell her about the woman he was engaged to before her mother. And so, in the first episode, her mother made a statement about how your father's no angel. Basically, this was shortly after she called off the wedding, and she was still campaigning for her and Eric to get back together. And basically saying that you know, that's basically what her words were. Your father's no angel. And so here you fast forward to episode 4, and he is basically telling her about the woman that he was engaged to before meeting her mother, and he broke off his engagement. He found out that her mom was pregnant. They got married, and he said that some years later he ended up running into the woman again, and he actually had an affair with her. And so he was like, that's what your mom meant when she said, oh, your father's no angel. And so, you know, Tara's listening to this and she's taking this all in. And then at this point, her mother comes in. And she kind of looks at her mother differently. Like, okay. Because at the time, it just felt like her mother was just being controlling and pushy. And to a certain extent, she was. But I think now she kind of saw her mother as, okay, so she really does understand what I'm going through. And so she gave her, you know, an embrace, and he kind of just sat back, and he felt like having a conversation actually is helping to repair her relationship with her mother. And so they meet with Ray and Tara meet with his friends, the couple, Johnny and Lydia, and basically inform them that they failed their drug test. He tested positive for marijuana. She tested positive for methadone, and she basically asked her, you know, if she had a prescription for methadone. There was not a whole lot she could say because obviously she doesn't. Fast forward, Vincent needing more help with the inquiry, he asked Tara if she would be willing to help him out. And she agreed to do it. I mean, he's helped her out a number of times, and she agreed to do it. And so Eric shows up at the coffee shop, and he is basically all this time he's been holding out hope that there would eventually be a reconciliation. Things would kind of go back to normal, go back to the way they were. And basically at this point, you know, because they've been cordial. It's not like they've been snapping at each other or snarling. I mean, they have been cordial with each other. And so there was still always that kind of door opening, like there could possibly be a reconciliation. But I mean, at this time, Tara basically told him that it was over, and you know, he finally got it. Like, they're not going to get back together. And so Eric, you see Eric, he's back at the office, and you know, you can see that he's crushed. And so he goes into his office and he basically breaks down. He's like bawling his eyes out. His mom walks in she goes into the office and she consoles him. And then next thing you know, you see her in the office with his father, Richard. And she is basically now painting Tara out to be the bad guy. Because he screwed up and she's not going to take him back. And all of a sudden now that makes him the bad guy. So now basically his family has it out for her. And that's what eventually unfolds in the rest of the episode. She basically was like, we have to do something. He's crushed. This is his mom talking to his father. And we are just going to have to do something. And so Ray and Tara are going over all the court documents. And she finds something that sticks out, that John has always been consistent as far as, you know, when dropping him off and picking him up. And he's basically been the caretaker because it's obvious that she has a drug addiction. She's not, you know, in where she needs to be mentally to, you know, do what she needs to do as a mother. And so John has been basically the primary caretaker. And so Tara, you know, she sits down with John and Lydia and basically explains to them that the only chance that they have of getting their son back is if John applies for sole custody and he has to move away from Lydia. So, of course, it was just a whole big blow up because he loves her and he wants to keep his family together. And he was, you know, very upset at the thought of being told that he's going to have to, in a sense, turn his back on her. He's basically choosing between his the love of his life, and his son. And so he throws him out, and, you know, for the time being, that was that. And so it flashes to Meg. Okay. So for some reason, Meg is in Tara's office, in the back office, and she's taking photographs of everything. And so you kind of see her, and you're kind of like, why is she doing that? And then she hears a noise, and the way she kind of ran off is like you could tell that something nefarious was going. So she hit the corner, and then she sees Ray. Ray has been there for however long, and he's there smoking weed. Basically, she sees him smoking weed. And he's like, what are you doing here? And she said, oh, I'm just, I was asked to take some photos for someone who's thinking about subletting or something like that, she told him. And she basically said, weed is terrible for you. And so she basically left. Ray is he's a street smart guy. You know, he grew up in the system, so he's very, and I don't know if at that moment he was kind of like taking it back, looking at, but, you know, she left and he went on with his day. And so Tara comes in. And she was like, you know, she's talking to Pete, and she asked him how his day was, and he said, not good. And she's like, well, what happened? And apparently, somehow, the owners found out that he was subletting the back office to Tara, which was a breach of his lease. And basically, they are pulling his lease, and he has to leave. And so, of course, they are taken aback, like, what? How would they find out who are these people? Because at this point they have no idea who the owners are. And so at that point, this is when he asked her out on a date. He offered to cook her dinner, and she accepted. And so at this time, she's trying to get Ray comes to visit. Not Ray. John comes to visit her, and he basically was like, "What do I need to do to get my son back?" And so they're going through the process of getting him together, as far as finding him employment, finding him a clean, sanitary place for him to take his child once he gets the child back, and they're basically working on him, trying to get him together. And so the first meeting comes up with Vincent's inquiry, where he's meeting with the first person. Of course, Eric is there because he's representing both individuals. You have that whole thing going on. And so he basically tells Tara that he mentioned someone named Timothy York and his connection to the inquiry, and there's some paperwork and this, that, and the third. Okay, so because remember, Tara's helping him with the inquiry. So she in this Meg's help, and basically was like, this is kind of hush hush. Vincent can't know about this. See what you can find out about this individual. And so of course, you know, she was like, okay. And then they also had her trying to find out who the owners were. And she was like, she doesn't have a clue. Like, she's still trying to figure that out. After she leaves, Ray was like, well, that's odd, because I did a bit of research and I found this company's name. And then Tara was like, well, that's the U.S. Leg of Dunbar. So it's related. It's connected to Richard's firm. The U.S. office of Richard's firm. And so, of course, they're thinking, so her mind is spinning, like, And so I think this is when they started questioning Meg. And then Ray asked Tara, like, are you thinking about renting the space? And she said, oh, did anybody talk to you about subletting the space or something like that? And Tara was like, no, no, and it doesn't make any difference now because we have to leave. And so that's when I think that kind of solidified her Ray, like, something's going on with Meg. Okay, and so Meg eventually calls Tara to let her know that she found the paperwork, I guess, of this Timothy York person. She found this in like some wooden shed. She can't go into the shed, but she took photos of it, sent the photos to Tara. Tara eventually sent the photos to Vincent. But the thing is, after she got off the phone with Tara, she made a phone call to somebody else, basically saying, I have some information for you. And so, basically, at this point, John has his day in court to try to get his son back. And, you know, it was an emotional scene because you still had the girlfriend there. She was all the way in the back. And, you know, you can see the look on his face, too, because he still loves her, but he understands that it's more important for him to not have his son in the system, because he, too, grew up in the system as a foster child. That's how him and Ray met. And so he doesn't want the same thing for his child. And so, in the end, the courts agreed to give John sole custody. And you saw that Lydia basically came to her senses and realized that the best place for their son was with John until she was able to get herself together. Okay. And so now we flash back to Vincent. He's back doing the inquiry with the second individual. And basically, someone made the connection between the interview with the first person and the first interview with this person. And he basically said that, you guys, your statements are basically the same, because legally they're not supposed to have discussed the inquiry. So Vincent is basically questioning him, like, why are your statements are so similar? He said, you haven't met this individual. He's like, no, I mean, we've bumped into each other doing our charity work. And he's like, but you've never discussed the inquiry, which obviously is a lie. And so, because he's thinking that he still has this ace in the hole where they shared with all these documents. And while he was questioning him, I don't know if it was a secretary or, his paralegal. I don't know what her role was, but she basically showed him the photo, and the shed with all the documents was burned to the ground. And so he basically postponed the inquiry to indefinitely, because he obviously has to find out what happened, what's going on here. And so Tara meets on, and so they leave. Tara and Ray are leaving the courthouse with John. His son runs up to him. It was a very cute, emotional scene, and he leaves. Ray leaves to do his community service, because that was part of the agreement. When he got off the first time, he had to do community service. And so Tara goes on to meet Pete for her dinner date. And so, things are going well. She's not there in about 10 minutes before she gets a phone call. So while Ray is out doing his community service, all of a sudden, 2 police officers walks up to him, and they know exactly where to find his drugs, because he still had the weed on him. And so Tara's like, oh my God, Ray's been arrested. I have to go. And she was very, apologetic, but he understood. And so more and more, they're starting to see what's going on with Meg. Tara goes to the jail to kind of sit down to try to find out what's going on with Ray. And she thinks at this point she doesn't know why he's been arrested until she goes in to talk to him. And he's sitting there with the look on his face, because he already knew. He already knew that it was Meg who tipped off the cops. And she said, don't worry, I'm going to get you out of here. And he said, no, I don't think it's going to happen this time. And she was like, well, why do you say that? He said, because they found my drugs. They found my weed on me. And she kind of looked at him, and she was like, wow, why does it... And then she, found out about the fire. And she said, why does it seem like everything is closing in on us? Like, basically somebody's out to get us. Who's out to get us? And he was basically like, and you know who it was. And that's when she came to the realization. And so the next scene is basically Tara and Eric standing either in the foyer of the office or outside somewhere. And they spot Meg and Richard, Eric's father, walking together, basically having a conversation. That's basically how it went off. So it's unclear whether or not Meg had been working for him the whole time, or if at some point during the time she threw out a number and he accepted, and she flipped on Tara. Tara was inconsistent in paying her because work was inconsistent. And Tara and Meg does have children. And so that's why I'm like, it's unclear whether or not when Meg started working for Richard, but the cat's out of the bag now. Everybody knows. And so that's basically how the season ended. So I'm going to probably post because the second season has already posted to Prime. So I'm probably going to post the first episode of the second season, either tomorrow or Thursday. So I'm going to end this here, and I will talk to you guys later.